And welcome everyone. We're looking forward to, I think after about 9 months of work, we're looking forward to talking to you about our University Press Library Open Initiative. Joining me today on the panels is Peter Potter. Peter's our VP of Paradigm Publishing Services, and he's also the Executive Director of our not-for-profit, the Gruyter eBound. Peter just joined us last spring, coming over from Virginia Tech Publishing. And he was also the head of the TOME project, so we're really excited to have Peter on board. Also with us today is Brian Hull. Brian is the CEO of Ubiquity. Ubiquity is an open access service provider and publisher that Gruyter acquired a little over a year ago. And together, the three of us are going to talk about this initiative and how we've kind of come together to launch this business model. Next slide, please.
Give me one moment.
There we go. So yeah, so I'm going to talk. I'll introduce the model today. Peter will spend some time talking about the details of the model and launching of the University Press Library on open access initiative, as well as Brian then talking about the UPLO and the community infrastructure that goes along with it. Ideally, we'll finish up with enough time for you to answer some Q&A questions. Next slide, please. Great. So when we think about like how do we get here, first I have to say this is really complex. Our model is complex and it's hard because there's a lot of moving parts. But probably the most important part to take away from this is what our role has been, I think, since we launched our partner program in 2012. And I'm going to give you a very brief history of how we've gotten here, because I think it plays an important role in why we're here, what are we trying to accomplish, and the reason why we think we're in a prime position to do so. But the common denominator since 2013, we signed our first publisher in 12, but the common denominator since then is our ability to listen, our ability, and I think the support that we receive to listen to stakeholders and to do something about that. And that's what you'll see over the course of the last 10 years. Next, Caitlin. In 2013, we had a model that was that we had launched. At the time, we were representing one press, and there was a lot of pushback, not only from the university press we were representing, but also from the library. And in 2013, there were really clear challenges. We heard those challenges and we responded to it. Next, please. In 2014 through 19, we did this pilot project where we kind of brought these stakeholders together for the first time, presses, partners, as well as libraries, including a consortia. And together we did this very long initiative trying to address those concerns that were raised in 2013 that continued through the 5 years of the pilot project. In 2019, we launched the University Press Library Open. This was a response. This is the result of the work that we did over those 5 years of the pilot, where we identified those challenges, and that community kind of came together in a formal model. By then, we had many more library participants, as well as many more university presses that decided to partake in the model, where it was mostly about financial sustainability, creating a new revenue stream, financial sustainability, and predictability, not only for the university presses, but also for the library community. After we launched that model, it was very clear that the market responded again. I think back then we had about 45 libraries that were participating, and the libraries were very clear about how we could improve our model, how we could strengthen our service offering, and we released then in 2020 the CARE standards that I think brought our model up to par with the expectations for collection acquisition to academic libraries. This went not only with what you see on the screen, but this idea of completeness, this idea of communicating when it comes to discovery layer of what's included, what's not included, reasons for why titles were not included. So a lot of work went into that in response to the library demand. Then once one of the things we learned as we went through those 5 years was that community that we had through the pilot project kind of stopped in 2019. and the access that the libraries had to the presses and vice versa, that the access the presses had to the libraries was something that was missing when we launched this model originally. And so again, the community asked, can we have more active engagement? And that started in 2021, where we kind of launched, next slide, please, where we kind of launched this this collaborative approach where we're kind of bringing together all the stakeholders in the community. And since then, we've been doing that. As you can see, the community has grown to include more presses and more libraries. Next slide, please. And in 2021, we kind of launched, we made a formal approach to bringing together that community with the idea that we would hear, not only focusing on the strengths of what we accomplished with the University Press Library, but listening about what's needed in the market, how do we respond, and how do we kind of facilitate that active discussion between presses and libraries. So that was in 2021, and one of the results of that was our not-for-profit, the demand of, hey, de Gruyter, you are a for-profit publisher participating in this community. You're bridging together the university presses as well as the academic libraries, and as a result of that, what else can we do with all of the success that we're having? And so in 2022, in response to the community, we launched the de Gruyter eBound. You can see here the mission statement, some information from the mission statement in terms of a focus on our values. And more importantly, members of the community, stakeholders, actually are part of our advisory board, which is comprised of both libraries and university presses. Next slide. So that being said, here we are in 2023, and now there's a new call to action that we're hearing from the community. This is on top of what's happening now. Peter will go into more details about the current initiatives that are out there in the marketplace, but despite all of that, there's still this call to action that was written into the Scholarly Kitchen earlier this year, and as a result of that, it addressed some of those concerns we were already hearing. Interest from our university press community into open access, as well as now really the demand from the library community for us to do something. Next slide, please. And so when we started thinking about this, because our model was strictly about paywall content, it was that financial predictability, it was that new revenue stream, this idea of market share. This is what we were representing on behalf of our university press community really for the last 10 years. And when we started thinking about how to get involved in open access, especially with all the initiatives that were out there, it led us to think about, okay, well, let's take a more holistic look. What is the evolution of these business models to academic libraries? And as you can see here, there's, other than print, not much has stayed static. Everything continues to evolve, whether it's in digital business models or in various opportunities that come into the market. And the latest one is with open access. And with open access, where our model did not directly represent it, it was a time between the call from the community as well as thinking about, well, what is next? How do we evolve to include open access into our business models? De Gruyter remains uniquely positioned. Here we are now with this idea, this intersection between publishers, aggregators, librarians, and the users. De Gruyter remains uniquely positioned to with the various assets and with the various acquisitions and partnerships and business development opportunities that we've done. We remain uniquely positioned to kind of take what we think is a leadership role in this area and put together something that we think is scalable, something that we think is equitable, and something that we think that will continue to allow us to grow as a service provider to our partners. Next slide. Along the way, as we were thinking about this model, as I mentioned, de Gruyter had acquired Ubiquity. We also had a couple of other. We had our publishing partner program, but de Gruyter is a publisher, is a scholarly publishing house, and so we've made the decision to kind of separate the scholarly publishing part of our business with the service side. And so with that, de Gruyter earlier this year launched Paradigm Publishing Services. Next slide, please. which brings together the various service units that the company has, which is our Ubiquity, that is aforementioned Ubiquity, as well as Ciendo, as well as our University Press Library and our partner program. And what Paradigm allows us to do is think about our core focus is on financial sustainability for our partners, and how do we provide that? What are the services needed to do that? And with all the assets we have, on one side, we have the representation of the University Press Library strictly with paywall content. And on the other side, we have the services that are provided to publishers that are strictly for open access with our Ubiquity and our Ciendo business. And what Paradigm does is starts to bring that together, where we think about that financial sustainability, especially demand in an academic library marketplace. It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be paywalled or open access, and how we think the future and the evolution of the future business models will be this dependency on having both. Next slide. And so that gets us to thinking about this idea of CLOPEN, closed content, open content, and this hybrid model of both closed and open. And I think that this is that paradigm shift, if you will, that we would like to bring to our press partners, our publishing and press partners. This idea of open and closed content as the future for financial sustainability, and how Paradigm can bring all those stakeholders together and come up with a business model that includes both in response to the market. Next. And so with that, that brings us to the work that we've put into the University Press Library Open. I can share with you that this started at the work that we put into this started at the London Book Fair, earlier this year, where we were in meetings, and it was really clear with our press partners and from the library community that something needed to be done, and that we needed to take advantage of the opportunity that we had with our partners and in our role with how uniquely positioned Gruyter is. And since then, we've worked together, both when Peter joined us, as well as with Brian over the last 9 months. We've kind of put this together, and I look forward to sharing that with you today. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Peter.
Great, thanks, Steve. As Steve said, my name is Peter Potter. Some of you may know me from my time in University Press Publishing, or more recently in my role as overseeing the TOME initiative as a visiting program officer for ARL. TOME concluded in 2022, and this past summer I joined De Gruyter, where I see this as kind of a natural progression for me. My role is to develop publishing services for De Gruyter as they're kind of evolving in this open access world that we're all trying to negotiate now. And I'm also executive director of De Gruyter eBound, which Steve mentioned, and I'll return to shortly. Next slide, please. Just going back very quickly to the University Press Library that Steve mentioned, I just want to highlight a few things, because the UPL is really the foundation upon which we are building University Press Library Open. As you can see here, we have, at this point, the UPL has grown substantially. We have nearly 120 libraries that have purchased collections from the more than 35 presses that are part of this. And for most presses, for all of the presses really, this has meant a substantial bump in revenues coming from library sales. One press director was reported publicly that ebook sales to libraries had doubled over just a short period. And what we're seeing is this is not just one-time sales, but the number of recurring front list sales continues to grow, making this really a sustainable program that introduces kind of predictability for presses and libraries, and also the potential for introducing the open access model that we're working on. Next slide, please. So some of you might have seen just yesterday or the day before, Outsell came out with a report on how scholarly content providers are responding, particularly in the climate created by the OSTP memo and Plan S deadlines. And OA is at the center of all of this. And it's certainly one of the biggest challenges we face with developing the UPL program. And we know that libraries are eager to support university presses, but we also understand that the libraries are not alone in their deep commitment to a future in which open access is fully integrated into the ScholComm system. In the report, it kind of sizes up nicely the disruptive role that OA is playing in scholarly communication. At one point, the report says that open access is not a trend, it is a seismic shift reshaping scholarly communication. And the report has a lot to say. I encourage you to read it about the impact that OA will have on business models in all areas of scholarly publishing, including HSS publishing. Next slide, please. So as Steve mentioned, there are there's been really throughout the ScholComm community, the publishing community, a lot of different initiatives to create business models for open access book publishing. And we've been following all of those and looking for ways to build upon lessons learned. Next slide, please. So what we've seen that's come out of these various initiatives is lots of lessons to be learned, but maintaining the momentum and pushing the agenda forward is the challenge we're all kind of dealing with. And what we need is, and what we hear again and again from libraries and publishers, is the need for collective action. And certainly the idea of spreading the financial burden, that libraries, one of the things that came out of the TOME initiative very clearly was that libraries they're very supportive of this. They want to support it financially, but they can't be the only financial source for funding a truly sustainable open access business model. And another thing that I think came out of these various initiatives is this idea of that I think that we're going to be living in a hybrid world where there are multiple pathways to OA. And if we try to pigeonhole everything into one particular approach or one particular pathway, I don't see that will take hold. Next slide. The other thing we need is clearly scalability across the scholarly publishing landscape. Most of the initiatives have involved individual presses or with TOME, we had 27, 28 presses. And the potential was there for scalability, but we hadn't figured out sort of how to take that next step. And one of the things we did, and here's where I introduce eBound, is we want to make sure that with de Gruyter's role in this, that who owns it is not de Gruyter, but our not-for-profit eBound. Next slide. So we've come up with this plan for what we're calling University Press Library Open. And we see it as a community-based approach, not just with our participating UPs, but multiple stakeholders. And we believe that we can spread the financial burden more equitably across that landscape. And I'll say a word about that in a second. And as I noted, it's, can you go back? It is administered by eBound. And so in my role overseeing eBound, one of the things I'll be doing is working with all of our presses to facilitate the publishing of open access books that become part of UPLO. And this is something I did with TOME that I learned a great deal from dealing with both the presses and the libraries. And I think I can bring that experience to eBound. Another thing we learned is that libraries have their workflows for collection and acquisitions. And the more models there are out there, the more individual separate programs there are, the more difficult it is to fit into those workflows. And what we think we have here is something that fits pretty seamlessly into library collection and acquisition workflows. And that's in large part built upon what we've done with the University Press Library. And another key part of this is no single path. We're seeing no single path to open. We're allowing presses to choose among multiple options, and we will work with them on finding the right path for them for particular books. And over time, as more and more books are published and made available open, we're collecting data on usage and how they're impacting sales, and we will make adjustments as we go along. And then we also made the decision, and again, I'll say a word about this shortly, to focus on the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. So eBound will be the facilitator for this. Our mission is to support sustainable scholarly monograph publishing, and as a not-for-profit foundation, we'll be able to administer the funds evenly, equitably to the partners. Next. Just to say, going back again, just very quickly, that we've already awarded to date nearly $150,000 to presses to support open access initiatives. And we will continue to do this. And as we go forward, much of the focus will be on the UPLO. Next slide, please. So we see eBound taking this kind of central role in facilitating all of the different stakeholders, publishers, library consortia, university leadership, funders, authors, vendors, and so forth. Next slide. And a key part of this will be ubiquity, which Steve mentioned, and Brian will be coming on shortly. We see ubiquity as critical in all of this because of ubiquity's kind of credibility in this space, the commitment to open scholarship, to open access, to open infrastructure. The UPLO will be hosted on the Ubiquity platform. And with that comes all of the knowledge and expertise that Ubiquity brings to the table. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the focus will be on UN Sustainable Development Goals. We see this as a way to, we see it as entirely appropriate given the nature of publishers' involvement in the Sustainable Development Goals, and the fact that international publishers have committed to these goals. And it's actually, for many university presses, a natural kind of a place for them to settle on, because it gives much of their work already addresses many of these goals, and it gives us kind of a focal point to begin with our open access program. Next slide, please. So we have, as I said, we are working with we're trying to establish different revenue streams to fund UPLO. The biggest part of it will come from the fees that are built into the purchase price of UPL collections. So this gets to the seamless part of it, rather than libraries having to, again, requisition money to support a different program. We're building a fee into the costs that they're paying for UPL collections, and this will go directly to eBound and then be distributed to the individual publishers in the program. We're also looking at memberships and pledges from libraries. So not all libraries currently are purchasing UPL collections, and we hope that will grow, of course, that we'll have more libraries signing on to UPL. But for those who don't and may want to support this initiative, we will have the opportunity for them to take on memberships and pledges. In the area of, I have university leadership there, faculty title subventions, key. We see that continuing to grow. It's not a huge part of or percentage of the income that'll be generated, but it continues to be a substantial, or at least a significant part of funding. And we're finding that many of our presses they have some authors who come with funds, and that can be folded into the funding that we use to support open. But in many cases, authors will not have that those subventions, and we can manage those as well. In addition, under the publishers there, we have the 30% that we're looking at the sales for the publishers, the continued sales of the print edition, and we've seen recently the report from AU Presses showing that sales continue to be pretty substantial even for open access books. And de Gruyter itself is committing a percentage of its revenues from the sales of the UPL collections to eBound. So we wanted to show that de Gruyter has skin in the game as well. And then finally, under the vendors, foundations, et cetera, we will be looking for different opportunities to raise funds from foundations and other charitable organizations, and as well as contributions from vendors and other for-profit players in the publishing ecosystem. Next, please. So with that, it brings me to the UPL Open, and here's a quick snapshot of a draft version of a beta version of how UPL Open will look on the Ubiquity platform. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Yes, I'm Brian Hull from Ubiquity. Ubiquity has been running for just over 11 years now, and many of you in the library world will know us as we've approached you over the years to see if we can help with open access publishing at your institutions. And through that, we've come to establish on our own side about 30 university presses and library publishing programs that are almost entirely open access. So when we joined forces with de Gruyter last year, it was quite exciting because we were able then to form this alliance, which brings UPL Open into being and gives us an opportunity to really help a lot of the established university presses to move towards open access as well, and to really expand their programs. And that to me is a really, really exciting development. So this is, as Peter said, this is the prototype of the UPL Open website. It will be hopefully up and running in January, and we're getting ready to start loading up the first content. And this is where all of the content will be hosted. And I noticed one of the questions in the chat was about why would we host it on this website instead of at de Gruyter? And the main answer really is that this website and this platform is fully optimized for open access. It was built purely with open access in mind, and the widest possible dissemination of content. And I'll show you that in the coming screens. It's really designed to make the absolute most out of open content. And what you're looking at here is the homepage of the website, which is here highlighting the sustainable development goals, but it will also show new collections of content coming from partners, new works that have been opened up, highlight the individual partners and so forth. And if we were to scroll down the page, you would also see all of the most recent books that had been published on the platform as well. Next slide, please. And this is an example of a partner page on the website. So each individual publisher that's a part of UPLO will have its own sort of microsite. In this case, this one's been mocked up for the University of California Press. And the idea here is for each press to be able to introduce itself, list all of its books, and enable searching through them, and so forth. So each of the presses, particularly those that don't currently publish open access, therefore automatically have their own open access websites to which all of their content leads. Next page, please. Next slide. And this is an example of a book page. So as open access books, all of the books live in the first instance online. They're digital first. And this is the page that where everything happens for the book. This is the page that the digital object identifier, the DOI for the book, takes you to. So it's the key place. And from this page, you can do everything with the book that open access allows. You can click to read it automatically online. You can download it in all digital formats. And then you can go and buy a paperback or hardback version of the book. Though the primary goal of this page is to make it the electronic versions accessible. And when you read the book, it's very interactive. You can go and you can annotate it, you can leave comments, etc. And the idea is really to drive as much use of the book straight away. And as you can see underneath the abstract here, we also collect a lot of metrics about the books. We collect everything from views and downloads to citations, social media activity, the number of annotations that have been made, etc. So we're trying to drive as much usage as possible, but we're also trying to record all of that and demonstrate the impact of the books once they're open. Underneath the book cover, you can also see the UN SDG badges. So books, not all books on the platform necessarily will be aligned with sustainable development goals, though we expect the majority will be. And when they are, then the corresponding SDG badges are placed next to them. It will also be possible to run an advanced search on the platform with faceting by the various SDGs as well. Other aspects of the page, the books are also published chapter by chapter, which is important. So each of the chapters receives its own citation metrics and download metrics, etc. This is also really critical for indexing in places like Google Scholar. We have an AI routine which runs over the books and pulls out key concepts aligned with Wikipedia, so people can understand the topics of the book in more detail. We display social media activity. Whether that continues permanently or not depends a little bit on what happens in the world of X and so forth, which is proving a little bit volatile. But wherever possible, we try to show as much context of the conversations happening around the work and the impact it's having. And once again, the DOI is really critical. The DOI is encouraged for citation, and it will always lead to this page. So anyone who sees a citation for the book can immediately come to a place where they can view it, they can download it, they can read it, etc. Next slide, please. And then this is my final slide. It's also to discuss, other than hosting the website, Ubiquity is providing the entire platform, but also a large number of additional services that can be provided to the publishers. One of the key things is that everything we do is 100% optimized for open access, for online consumption, digital distribution, the widest possible indexing and findability, and the highest impact. So having always been 100% open access, as a company, that's always been our sole focus. And the platform is really built to focus that way. And the services we are offering to back up the publishers and enable them to bring the content open access as easily as possible, include everything from the online hosting that I've just demonstrated through to loading up of the backlists, everything that's involved in the entire publication process, from anti-plagiarism checks through copy editing, typesetting, proofreading, etc., through to creating online friendly and mobile friendly versions of the content, such as EPUB and Mobi. We handle the chapter by chapter production. We can help the presses with print on demand, etc. And most critically, we also index and distribute. So everything automatically goes out to OAPN. So as well.
It seemed we lost you on that last the last sentence there.
Oh, which one about indexing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll just recap that part. One of the key parts about the platform is that we index and distribute differently to as vast a target audience as we possibly can. So everything from registering the DOIs to loading and sending everything up to OAPN and its associated services, directory of open access books. The content is highly findable and highly accessible to anyone searching anywhere in the world. And we also push to JSTOR for publishers that want it as well, and onto services such as Scopus and Web of Science as well. And the final thing I would say is also we do additional services like mark record creation and so forth for publishers that don't traditionally do that. So it's really optimized for getting content out on the web, but also out to libraries. And that concludes my section. I'll hand back to Steve and Peter.
Great, thanks, Brian. We're trying to keep up with the questions in the chat, but I think we've answered, it looks like 10 of them already. So in the Q&A, so please check that out. And if you don't mind, I'll just read a couple of questions and answer them. And then, yeah, that would be great if people want to continue to type in some questions into the chat for Brian, Peter, or myself. Question from Deborah about making information available on Ex Libris for access to Alma users. What I can say is, well, we're in the process, as Brian said, of building the platform and supporting it with content. Tommy Grover from Multilingual Matters had talked about, will we support existing open access titles? I think that is the plan. We are still in the early stages. We have yet to, this will be launched in 2024. A couple of things. There's multiple revenue streams that we're talking about here, not just one, but we do think the major one will be the benefit of our University Press Library collections. What are those collections? They're complete copyright year collections of content from our press partners that we sell directly to academic libraries. There will be an open access component to that collection. You can sort that out directly with your sales manager. That will send money directly to the Gruyter eBound to facilitate this open access initiative. But like I said, there's multiple revenue streams, and so the collection of those multiple revenue streams will happen from the Gruyter eBound as the facilitator, and then that revenue will then be directed to each of our individual University Press partners. So that being said, that process is still a work in progress. As I've said, the train is left the station. We have already engaged our academic libraries about this for 2024, and we have put the resources, and we're building the infrastructure to support all of this. So there's also a lot that we need to figure out. But the content, ideally, we host already a lot of our partner open access content. That content, moving it over to Ubiquity makes a lot of sense. And once we build the platform and we have content on there, and I think it's reasonable to have set some deadlines and goals for that. Brian, I don't know if you're prepared to talk about exactly when that platform will go live. But I would say that we can certainly communicate that. And then, Deb, to your point, yes, the expectation is that all the discovery layers will be there. And to me, that's, at the end of the day, that's the most exciting part, how we can curate content from accredited publishers with very strong brands, global brands. How can we curate that content on an open access platform to fulfill the mission of not only the Gruyter eBound, but also all of our press partners to disseminate that content globally? And the best way we can do that is by having a strong discovery layer, and that'll be a core focus of what we do. So I'm actually, if I may, I personally, I'm most excited about that as we build up the amount of content that the platform will host. The process for allocating funds to publishers will be, it's a tricky question to ask. It depends on the revenue streams. Right now, we know of one revenue stream. We're working on a couple of others. And as they come in, without getting too deep into the weeds, there's recurring revenue streams, there's one-time revenue streams, and how do we support that? When we talk about equity here, we're not just talking about funding the authors at libraries with a strong research institute where funding is available. We want to talk about funding authors that don't have access to support open access funding for themselves. So I think that the dissemination of revenue to our partners, some of that will be very clearly direct because it'll be directly linked to their paywall content, and the rest will be done on an equitable basis. But I think our goal will be to make sure that we're supporting an author community that's diverse and providing a revenue stream to support that. So hopefully that makes sense. How will the titles be selected to ensure that just including junk filler titles? Well, I think if you look at the quality of the publishers that we represent and the brands that we're talking about an accredited, peer-reviewed content. May I add, these are thoroughly peer-reviewed content titles that have been published, and so I think that we're only talking about putting that quality of content curated onto the UPL platform. And the fictional word clopen, if I may, what we're saying here is the paradigm shift that we're focused on is this idea that financial sustainability doesn't have to be one or the other, that it requires both. And I think that is the approach that we are taking, and that approach will take some time. Everybody's at what we were learning in this, and I think Peter and I have a lot of conversations about this, and how whether it's a library or it's a publisher is at different levels on the spectrum of where they stand on between paywall content and open access. And I think where we want to start the conversation is saying, well, both. You can have both, and both can work. And hey, we're going to work with you as a service provider on how to make that happen. And I think that's the idea of getting us to think about not just the closed, but also the open content. Next question: can publishers submit edited books? Yeah, I think this is a question.
Would you like me to?
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, they can. Basically, Ubiquity can support the publishers from any part of the publishing process. We can be involved early on, or we can be involved right at the end and simply, upload them and publish the content for them. We take all typical types of files from Word and LaTeX through to InDesign, etc., Markdown. One of the things we probably do, areas where we add a lot of expertise, is in optimizing EPUBs for online viewing and annotation and so forth. But the idea is to be as flexible as possible and partner with the publishers in order to get their content online as quickly and easily as possible. So yeah, we get involved at any stage.
Thanks, Mike. Caitlin, could you do me a favor? Could you share your screen and put the questions on the screen so that people know what we're answering? I'm realizing that not everyone can, and I can't share my screen, so that would be
yes, I can do that.
And if you don't mind scrolling down, the last question that we answered was from Michael Haskell. The next is from an anonymous Centene. There's some good questions here.
Can everyone, Steve, can you see that?
No, we just see the PowerPoint. If you can just open up the Q&A box, please.
Okay.
Yeah, and share that. That's possible. You can try that. There's a question also about, yeah, the question here very quickly about OA titles that are automatically included, and funding is derived from both the collection price and Gruyter's revenue. Neither impact the publisher's sale of the collection. This makes, yeah, I guess it's more of a comment than a question from anonymous NT. I think what's worth including that there is a balance between the open access content. I mean, this is specifically with our University Press Library model that will eventually include open access content as well. And all of that is embedded, and it will be included together and included in all the discovery layers. This is a work in progress. I do think that we'll be, and we're doing this uniquely right now with 35 plus publishers that are all at different levels of how they send information to aggregators. It is worth saying that there's no exclusivity here. There's no requirements, there's no exclusivity. This is about opening content and making that content available in as many channels as possible upon publication or upon becoming open. And Ubiquity, it's a service, as Brian said, that Ubiquity will provide to our partners. Another question from Deb about the number of partners that have agreed. Well, I think, as I mentioned, there's 35 partners, and every partner is at a different point when it comes to open access. That's the interesting thing about the call to action, and as we think about this publishing community, and then the differences. I think there's a difference whether you group 1 press or you group 4 press, a difference between your dependencies, a difference in terms of your financial situation and how you think about the difference between open access and free access. And so there's a lot of challenges, I think, about there's a lot of challenges here. And I think that when we created the model, we wanted to create a model that provided the service to our partners, and then it's up to the partners to determine whether or not they participate. So all I can promise you is that that the Gruyter eBound, in concert with all of that collective action that Peter mentioned, will collect money. We will earmark money strictly for open access to our University Press partners, and then it's up to them to determine how they want to allocate that internally. There will be other benchmarks in there and other conversations. Those conversations are ongoing, but ideally, to answer your question, Deb, is that we expect that for the 35 publishers that we're talking about, that we will have 35 different donations, 35 different revenue commitments for them. I would think by May or June of next year, that is earmarked for open access, and ideally all of our partners will participate. And then we have, if someone decides not to participate in this initiative, then we have a mechanism in place to repurpose that money to the broader community.
Steve, it's also worth mentioning that the response from the presses has been very positive thus far, and none of the presses have said we don't want to participate. So I think there's that we're all kind of figuring out how the model will work, and so there's work to be done here in terms of kind of working out the details. But the response we've had from all the presses has been positive.
Yes, thanks for that. Yeah, it certainly has, and this is and this continues to be a work in progress. There's still a lot of conversations, 35 individual conversations that we need to have, probably a little bit more than that at the moment. And but again, overall, I think so far it's been well received. In terms of who will be selecting the titles, Charlie, that will be determined by each individual publisher. And no, there's no hybrid models. There's no, this is an open book, or this is a completely open book. So there's no hybrid models.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that, we were looking at a hybrid landscape for publishing going forward, that there will be different models being tried, and there will continue to be open content and paywall content, but everything that is part of UPLO is entirely open.
Yeah, I should stress also that the Ubiquity platform doesn't do non-open content. It's 100% pure open, nothing else.
Great. Charlie asked a question about the issues with UPL metadata. Thanks, Charlie. Yes, I think this idea of, we're a publishing house that's become an aggregator, and I think that this has been a work in progress, and we have established the CARE standards, and there's always room for improvement. I do think that we as an organization in light of everything that's happening and talking about the Gruyter and the Gruyter's infrastructure, have made some decisions about the separation from Paradigm and from our publishing house allows us to reassess that infrastructure. There's a lot of good news here that a lot of libraries have been asking for, and the restrictions that we have with our systems in terms of how fast we get content online, and is something that we are well aware of, and that we are very fortunate to be able to take some positive next steps with. So, yes, it needs to be very clear that we are, as an organization, we are an aggregator second. That's very clear. We're a publishing house, but this idea of Paradigm allows us to have separate resources to solely focus on this. And so it's good timing between the release of Paradigm with this initiative with UPLO, as we have dedicated resources that aren't sidetracked with publishing resources as well. The other question is, how is this same or different from the path to open? I think the ecosystem requires multiple open access business models, and I think we're constantly learning from each other. Very specifically to this one model is, as you know, this is. I think it really will depend. I think the best way to answer that is it will depend on the publisher. The publisher is going to determine what titles they are going to open. We are going to work with them to set those benchmarks, and we hear different things about that. But ideally, I think the number one benefit that's different from that is that there's no exclusivity, which I understand why there is. I can understand why other models are operating in the terms of this is all against the landscape of financial sustainability. That's paramount. We can't have open access if it's not financially sustainable. And I think we need multiple models to do that. But I can say probably the biggest difference is the lack of the need for exclusivity. The question is there a place for fully OA born OA presses in UPLO, or is it inherently couched for? Yeah, that's a good question. At the moment, I think that our focus is providing a service to our partners, and our focus is on financial sustainability in this open environment. This idea where paywalled and open access can live together, and that's probably a bit of where, again, we're different from Path to Open, that we're fitting a different niche within the market, as we need. As the market needs multiple business models, and we're just filling one niche. But at the moment, our model is directly for the partners that we represent, and financial sustainability for open and closed content.
One thing I'd add to that too is that, you know, with the Canadian university presses are part of the University Press library, and some of those are fully OA presses. So we're certainly not excluding them.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you for reminding us about that. And there are also a press that does participate in our A-Cup model, which allows some of those exceptions. All right, so I think we answered all the questions that were in the Q&A.